Hi folks, in previous videos I showed you three different ways of creating rule sets with selectors. First, you can target on the basis of an element. You can create a selector that targets a class, or you can create selectors that target IDs. In this video I wanted to show you some other types of selectors that allow you to target in different ways. First, let me show you the universal selector. And the universal selector is just like that. It's an asterisk. And if we go color blue, notice that what it's doing is it's just saying every particular element in the HTML style it blue. So that's the universal selector. So next up on the list is a grouping selector. So you've already seen this selector, right? It's targeting all the paragraphs. But notice what is left out here is, this H2 is being left out of that. We could write another selector like this, H2, write just an element selector to also target it. But we can actually use a grouping selector like so. Just put a comma here and then H2, and now it also is targeting all the paragraphs and all the H2s in the document. That's called a grouping selector. Now take special note that the grouping selector, you're just combining all the different elements that you're trying to target. You can put classes or IDs in here too, and separating them with commas. And that's different from, say, a descendant selector. So let's try a descendant selector next. Let's do section P. And notice that there's no comma here. And what this is saying is select all of the paragraphs that are descendants of the section, that have the section as a parent. So that's just these two. This paragraph right here is not targeted. That is different, okay? Notice that the way you do that is you use a space in between those. That's different than the grouping selector, because if we put a comma here, that would now be a grouping selector, and that now means target all the sections and all the paragraphs. So that's different. Let me just write a different descendant selector. So this is just saying target all the paragraphs that are descendants of the body. And actually that's not going to be any different than this. That's the same thing. Let me show you another, something called a child selector. So if this is a descendant selector, this is what we call a child selector. And a child, of course, a child, genealogically speaking, not in terms of HTML, is a descendant of a parent. But what this is saying is target the paragraph that is a direct child of the body. And notice that the only paragraph that is a direct child of the body here is this tag here. It doesn't include any of these, right? Any of these, because these are not, they're descendants of the body, they're not direct children of it. So this is another selector that you can use. Although I should say, as an aside, I don't use child selectors all that often. The ones I use most are grouping selectors, the ones with commas, and occasionally the descendant selector, the one where you separate the elements that you're trying to target with spaces. Finally, let me show you a pseudo class selector, and this targets on the basis of a change in state. So here we are saying when we're hovering over a particular element, and the element can be a paragraph, change the color to blue. So let's try that. And that's not working. And it's because I had them reversed. You've got to first specify the element that you are trying to target, and then you specify the state. So what this is saying is change the color of the paragraph to blue if if it's being hovered over. So that's being hovered over changes it to blue. When I'm not hovering over, it changes back to black. Same here. That's doing the same thing. So that's what we call a pseudo class selector. So quickly, just by way of review, we have simple selectors that target elements on the basis of elements, IDs, or classes. The universal selector, where we use an asterisk. Grouping selectors, where we separate the things we're going to target, whether they're IDs, elements, or classes, with a comma. Descendant selector, where we separate those IDs or elements or classes with a space. Child selector, where we make the separation with this particular symbol, and then a pseudo class selector, and here's just an example. Okay, hope that was helpful.